The jury is back in the courtroom. Call your next witness, please.
Brenton Loack.
Good morning. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer a note? Do you solemnly swear or affirm on the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
My full name is Brenton David Loack, Brenton, David, David, Loack, Lowak.
You may proceed, Ms. Tish-McGuire.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Loack, could you please tell the jury what you do for a living?
I am an emergency medical technician and firefighter.
Were you at the Century 16 movie theater on July 19th, 2012 in Aurora, Colorado?
I was.
Did that go into the early morning of July 20th, 2012?
It did.
Could you please tell the jury about what you remember about the day of July 19th of 2012, prior to going to the movie theater?
Well, we started off our day a little late, but we were spending time together. I was up here on vacation. We went to the Coors Brewery.
I'm going to stop you for a second. Who's we?
We, Jessica and myself.
And who's Jessica?
Jessica Gowie is my good friend of almost 10 years.
How'd you know Jessica?
I met her in high school back in fall of 2002, and so it began. Gosh, we covered a lot of ground in that time, and great friendship. We dated for a while.
Interject an objection under 403 and 401.
The objection is overruled, but ask your next question, please.
What, were you visiting Jessica from another state?
I was. I'm from Texas.
Right. So when had you arrived to visit Jessica?
I arrived, I believe it was the 17th of July.
Of 2012?
Of 2012, yes.
What do you recall doing with Miss Gowie that day?
That day, as I said, we went to the Coors Brewery. We went on a tour, hung out, and we went back to her residence, and we just played catch-up. We hung out by the pool. We just talked like we hadn't got to talk in a while. She had moved up here the year prior, and
Interject an objection 403.
Sustained.
Did you and Miss Gowie decide to go to the movie theater that day?
we did. After much persuasion, she twisted my arm, essentially. She's like, I never thought I'd have to twist a guy's arm to go see Batman. But any which way, we decided to go see the midnight release, and turns out they were sold out of tickets as soon as we tried to buy them. She checked again, and turns out there was a 12:05 showing. So we bought the tickets and eventually made our way to the theater later on that evening.
Do you recall approximately what time you got to the theater that night?
I'm going to go out on, approximately, it was probably about 11:40, 11:45.
What'd you do when you got to the movie theater?
We went through the motions. We got our tickets. She had this obsession with this weird popcorn salt stuff, so she got her fix there. We made our way into the theater, and we just sat down and watched the previews. We were walking in as the auditorium was darkening for the previews.
Were you able to tell how full the movie theater was at that time?
It was packed. It was the midnight release, or the premiere night, so it was a very, very full theater.
Where did you find your seats that night?
It was the 12th row, offset to the right of the auditorium, probably 6 to 8 seats in.
So if you're facing the movie theater screen and this is the movie theater screen, were you closer to the right side of the theater or the left side?
Closer to the right side.
What do you recall of doing prior to the movie starting?
We were watching the previews. I remember there was that new Superman movie that was supposed to be coming out. I remember one of the gentlemen in the audience was wearing a Superman shirt, and he struck his little pose, and we all laughed. We were just, cutting up and having a good time, just getting ready for the movie, getting geared up. And, yeah.
What happened during the movie?
We're probably guesstimating 20, 30 minutes in. and I remember hearing a hissing noise coming from the front right of the theater by the emergency exit. And it drew my attention over there, but being that it was dark, I couldn't see anything. Shortly thereafter, I saw what was making the hissing noise being hurled across the theater, and it was going up theater, probably somewhere a row or so in front of us, but off to the opposite side, to the left side of the theater. And I remember there was this brief pause as soon as it hit the area of people, and then this surreal effect happened. It's like a drop of water hitting, and this wave of people just erupted away from where the object had been thrown. And I was kind of puzzled at first, and then the first shot rang out, and I was like, oh, this is actually happening.
What do you recall after that first shot rang out?
Of course, mass panic, chaos, people screaming. We stood up and we started to make our way to the right to exit our row. We got about one seat length down the way, and I realized that people aren't moving out of the way fast enough, and I pushed us to the ground.
When you say us,
Jessica and myself.
all right, what happened when you pushed her to the ground?
It was to get cover. The whole time she was saying, call 911, call 911. She was in a kind of a laying down position for cover. I was kind of in a low profile crawling position.
And could you describe for the jury how your bodies were at that point?
She was laying prone, which is stomach down, just flat on her stomach basically, taking cover, saying call 911. Myself, I was kind of in a curled up ball, but like in a crawling type position.
Were your heads closer to the right aisle or closer to the left aisle?
We're both facing the right exit. So at that point, I started to feel the spray of popcorn and soda just all around. I noticed her tone changed entirely, transitioned from call 911 to screaming, and I looked down to see that she had been shot in her right leg. I believe it was right above the knee. As an EMT, I just finished my course, my training, and my first step from there was just to control the bleeding, so I applied pressure to her gunshot wound. Again, there was a continued spray of popcorn and soda or whatever was going on. I felt, I tried to reach for my phone in my pocket, and given my position, I wasn't able to do that, so I straightened out my leg. I kneeled up a little bit to gain access to my pocket to get my phone, and that was when I sustained a shot to my left buttocks.
Are you hearing anything in the background while all this is going on?
Shots continued to ring out. My perception of time was adrenaline slowed things down a lot, but I do recall shots being fired.
Now, describe for the jury the shots that you heard in the theater that night.
Well, as soon as the first shot rang out, it was just a loud bang, and then a pause, and then a bang, and it just continued. As soon as I saw that Jessie had been shot, my focus transitioned to taking care of her. So the shots continued, and I had at that point had gotten out my phone, and I fumbled around to call 911 as soon as I could, as quick as I could, but I got some weird busy message on my phone. And so I stuck it back in my pocket. I had noticed at this point that the screaming had stopped, and Jessie had sustained a shot to the head, in which case brain matter was exposed. It was at that point I crawled a little closer to her, and I prayed over her.
I move to strike 403.
Overruled.
You can continue, Mr. Lillock.
Um, I didn't really know what to do. It just felt right. I just gave her the best send-off I could. And at that point, my medical technician back, the training had kicked in, and we would count a patient like that in the EMS world as a black tag triage, which means they have injuries that are incompatible with life. At that point, I felt that my own survival was my next priority, and I made my way all the way across the aisle that I was in to the small section of seating that was right above the entrance tunnel to the right of the theater. My strategy was that if the shooter had come back, actually, I skipped a part. While I was laying there with Jesse, I looked up theater, the upper rows, and I saw someone stand up and run out, and I heard no shots fired out. So I figured at that point, if I'm going to move, now is my chance. So that's when I made my way to the end of the aisle. I sat there thinking if the shooter did come back, I could throw myself over the wall and land down in the tunnel and scurry off, and hopefully I'd have a chance. But the shooter never returned. Somebody cried out, "Somebody please help, please." And at this point, my leg had started to stiffen up a little bit. My adrenaline was wearing off. I remember hollering out and saying, "Just put pressure on it, help is coming." Not very long after, I saw personnel in uniform enter the auditorium, and one of them worked his way up my aisleway and found me there, and I said, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "I've been shot. I think I'll be okay." And he's like, "All right, stay put." And I was like, "Actually, this gas is really irritating me. Is there any way that I could get out of here?" And he said, "Absolutely, let's get you out." So that particular officer and one other helped carry me out of the theater, and they took me down and out that right front emergency exit, where I remember seeing bullet casings all over the floor. I remember seeing a few banana clips. I saw an assault rifle sitting on the ground as I walked out the emergency exit. They carried me out the door and around the corner and laid me on my stomach.
I'm going to stop you right there for a second, Mr. Locke. Did you know what had happened to Jesse at that point in time?
Your Honor, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Did you see Ms. Gowie being carried out of the theater at all?
I did not.
Your Honor, with this court's permission, I would ask Mr. Locke to join me up at the 3D model.
Yes.
And Mr. Locke, if you can grab that cordless microphone that's up at your desk there. All right, and if you could turn that on, good. If you could please show the jury where you and Ms. Gowie were seated and tell them which seat's yours and which seat is hers.
Well, she was to my right. This was the row right here, and we were probably between 6 to 8 seats in, so I suspect it was approximation in this particular area. I was sitting to her left, right there. That's where she was. When shots rang out, we stood up and started to work our way over. It was at that point I pushed us down, so we were down in this particular aisle. And, we'd been shot at. And after she received the head shot, and I suspected that the theater was cleared up a little bit, I made my way directly across right here into this little nook, and I was sitting up against this wall thinking that I could go over the edge if I needed to. And then I was carried out down the stairs and through the emergency exit out the front.
Could you show the jury where you saw that object being hurled across the theater?
It was a few feet in front of the emergency exit itself.
Were you ever able to see any gunshots?
No, I saw a muzzle flash and silhouette
Could you show the jury where you saw that muzzle flash and silhouette?
in the same area, close by the emergency exit.
Could you describe for the jury where it was that you saw the casings that you remember seeing in the clip?
Pretty much the whole floor, I want to say probably 3 rows or so, all the way to the actual emergency exit itself.
Now, when you exited through there, there's a parking lot that's right behind you. Can you show for the jury where you were placed when you got outside the theater?
So there was a wall right here, and I was placed pretty much about right here, up against the wall, laying on my stomach.
All right, I'm going to stop you right there, and you can go take your seat. Thank you very much, Mr. Locke.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. McGuire, the objection is overruled. You may proceed.
Mr. Locke, without stating what you said or that evening, did you make any phone calls?
Yes, I did.
Where were you when you made those phone calls?
Upon being escorted out of the theater, I called Sandy Phillips, Jessica's mother, and informed her that her daughter had been shot.
Your Honor, hearsay 403-401.
Sustained.
Did you call anyone else after you called Miss Phillips?
I called my own mother.
So what happened after you were escorted out of the theater to the back?
I remember seeing there was a lady who had a finger shot off. I remember seeing someone laying on the ground close by my...
Interjection with an objection to 403.
I'll allow brief testimony. So you can answer this question. Actually, I think he answered it.
He saw more than just one victim, Your Honor.
All right. Go ahead, ask another question.
After you observed other injured people behind the theater, did you receive any medical attention eventually?
Eventually I did. They tried to take me to the hospital, and I did assist with triage because I felt somebody was in worse condition than myself. I was probably the third or fourth to last person to leave. I remember hearing one of the officers say, "We're out of ambulances."
Your Honor, calls for
Sustained.
hearsay.
You cannot talk about what other people said outside the courtroom. Okay? All right. You may proceed.
Were you placed in a vehicle to be transported?
I was.
Please describe for the jury what that vehicle was.
The vehicle that was available was a van. I believe it was a supply van. 4 officers carried me, stomach down, over to this van. They opened the back doors where there was permanent fixed shelving. They realized that wasn't an option. Took me to the side, opened up the 2 side doors, and one of the shelves extended halfway into that. I told them at that point, "I'm partially ambulatory. Set me down. I'll crawl in." And that's exactly what happened. There was a lady who held pressure on my wound the whole trip to the hospital. I was taken to Children's Hospital where I was admitted.
What happened when you got to Children's Hospital?
The same issues getting me in as getting me out. They were trying to figure out how to get me out, and I told them, "Yeah, this leg, don't touch this leg, just pull me out, with the other one, grab me and pull me out." They loaded me onto a stretcher and took me into a trauma room where they assessed my wound. They applied direct pressure and tried to stop the bleeding.
Were you taken into surgery?
I was. They realized that direct pressure was not going to stop the bleed, so they put me into emergency surgery where they performed abdominal surgery. They opened me up and repaired the damaged blood vessels, removed a few of the shrapnel fragments, and sewed me up, and went to recovery from there.
Could you please describe for the jury all the locations you were injured?
So I was shot in the left buttocks. I sustained a shrapnel burn to my right bicep. The shot to the buttocks, internally hit the wing of my hip, sending shrapnel throughout my abdomen.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
You can continue, Mr. Locke.
So, as I said, they patched the blood vessels. There was some nerve damage caused by some of the shrapnel that ultimately caused one of my abdominal muscles to atrophy. I was also informed later on by an x-ray that I had a piece of
Calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
What else did you learn about your injuries?
X-rays showed that I had shrapnel in my shoulder as well.
Do you have any permanent injuries today?
Objection, 403.
Overruled. It goes to the extent of the nature, character, and extent of the injury consistent with my order C-200.
You can continue, Mr. Locke.
To this day, excluding minor deformities, I have a clicking sensation in my hip every time I take a step. I was informed that 10 to 15 years
Your
from
Honor,
now.
hearsay.
Sustained.
Will you need additional surgeries for your hip in the future?
I will.
And do you have permanent nerve damage?
I do.
Your Honor, if I may approach the witness with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 4556 and 4686.
You may.
First, looking at 4556, do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
Does that photograph fairly and accurately represent the injuries that you sustained from July 20th of 2012?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time I would move for the admission of People's Exhibit 4556 and ask that it be published.
Is there any objection?
Additional objection.
Are these subject to my order amended D-98B?
No, Your Honor.
They're not subject to that order,
No, Your Honor.
right? Well, is there any objection then at this time?
No.
All right, without objection, P-TR-554, 556, and 4686 are all admitted and may be published.
All right, at this time, if I could please have 4556. All right, could you describe for the jury what we see in this picture?
That is a drain coming out of my left gluteal muscle and stitches closing up the wound.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Loak, do you recognize the person in photograph 4686? I think it's the next photograph on your...
I do recognize her.
Who is that person?
That's Jessica Gowie.
Have you seen Ms. Gowie alive since July 20th of 2012?
I have not.
And at this time, I would move for the admission of 4686.
I thought all three were admitted without objection,
Oh, I apologize, Your Honor.
right?
I think the district attorney had moved to publish the second exhibit. I have no objection to this second photograph.
Well, the request right now is not to publish. The request is to admit. And so I don't know if you misspoke. I thought that you had moved the admission of all three exhibits. I thought you had said you had no objection, and I thought I had said they were all admitted. But if you folks want to have this discussion all over again, I'm happy to do it.
And I apologize, Your Honor. To be clear, Your Honor, I only moved to admit 2 exhibits total.
Okay,
And that was
which exhibits?
4556 and 4686.
All right, and so 4556 and 4686, Ms. Spengler, you have no objection to either one of those two, right?
That's correct.
All right, so those two are admitted. 554, do you have any objection to that one?
I didn't tender that exhibit, Your Honor.
Okay, you're not moving the admission of 554. All right, okay, you may proceed.
If I could please publish 4686 with the court's permission.
Any objection? All right, go ahead.
I could have 4686. Could tell the jury who this is.
This is Jessica Nicole Gowie.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Any cross-examination, Ms. Spengler?
No, thank you.
And the jury doesn't have any questions, so may this witness be released from his subpoena?
Please, Your Honor.
Any objection? No. Thank you, sir. Call your next witness, please.
Scott Swanson.
Good morning, sir. Come on up, please. Could I have you raise your right hand for me so that I can administer an oath? You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear.
Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
Okay, my name is Scott Stephen Swanson. You said spell it?
Yes, please.
SCOTTSTEVEN
Mr. Edson, you may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you do for a living?
I manage the online sales department for my company, Security Pro USA.
What is Security Pro USA?
We distribute and sell ballistic and other security-related products to both consumers and government agencies alike.
What are the types of products that are sold by Security Pro USA?
We sell everything from tactical flashlights to bulletproof vests to bulletproof Kevlar helmets. Mostly it's the ballistic items like hard armor plates, bulletproof vests, and ballistic helmets.
What do you mean by ballistic?
It's rated by the National Institute of Justice to withstand, certain criteria. Typically, in layman's terms, they're bulletproof.
Can general members of the public purchase items from Security Pro USA?
Yes.
Can that be done in an online e-commerce type fashion?
Yes, we sell on multiple channels.
What do you mean by multiple channels?
Our primary mode of business for our online sales, as far as distributing these, is through our website, securityprousa.com, but we also do occasionally sell helmets and stuff like that on eBay as well.
Through your online presence, can individuals purchase items if they are members of the general public?
Yes.
Are you a records custodian for Security Pro USA?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with how records are kept, maintained, and retrieved by Security Pro USA.
I am.
Are you familiar with another business called, or platform I should say, called Yahoo Small Business? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. Yahoo Small Business is the platform that our website, securityprousa.com, is hosted on.
Okay, what do you mean by that, the platform that it's hosted on?
It basically, they not only provide hosting for the actual site, but they also handle all of the e-commerce transactions. So if a customer were to purchase something, it would be handled by Yahoo Small Business.
Do you maintain records associated with your customer purchases via the Yahoo Small Business? Do you receive those records?
Yes, we do.
Do you keep those in the normal course of your business as well?
We do.
And are you, as a custodian of records, familiar with those types of records?
I am.
I'd like to approach the witness, if I could, please, with People's Exhibit 308.
Yes.
I've handed you what's been previously marked as People's Exhibit 308. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do.
What is that exhibit?
This is the back end of our ordering platform. This is an order.
Is there a particular date associated with that order?
Yes, the order was made on Thursday, June 28th of 2012.
Was there a particular customer name associated with that order?
James Holmes.
Was there a particular email associated with that order?
Yes, it's D as in Delta, Sherlock, B as in Bravo @hotmail.com.
Prior to your testimony today, have you had an opportunity to view that particular record?
I have.
Do you recognize that record as being maintained by Security Pro USA?
Yes.
Does that appear to be a fair and accurate exhibit copy of the transaction from June 28, 2012 involving James Holmes?
It is.
Are you familiar with the entry system as well as the record system associated with online orders for SecurityProUSA.com?
I am.
And does that also extend to the interplay between Security Pro USA and Yahoo Small Business as the platform?
That is correct.
I'd like you to look at People's Exhibit 308 and first of all, is that a computer record?
Yes, that is. As soon as the order is placed by the consumer, this record is created on the back end of Yahoo.
Is that maintained electronically?
Yes.
The computer entry associated with People's Exhibit 308, is that made within the regular course of Security Pro USA's business?
It is.
Those participating in the making of People's Exhibit 308, is that done in a routine course of business?
It is.
The input procedures used for People's Exhibit 308, are they accurate?
They are.
Regarding People's Exhibit 308, would there be any sort of notation if any of the items were modified or changed or anything like that?
That is correct. Anytime the order is modified, the Yahoo platform creates a notation saying that this order was modified, and it also gives you the date and time and who it was modified by.
Do you see any sort of modifications or notes to that effect in People's Exhibit 308?
I do not.
Based upon that, does it appear that this is a record that has not been modified in any sort of way?
That is correct.
I may have asked this, I apologize if I have. The input procedures with People's Exhibit 308, are they accurate?
They are.
The entries that are associated with People's Exhibit 308, were they made within a reasonable time after the order transaction?
Yes, as soon as the customer adds to cart and checks out, that record is created automatically.
People's Exhibit 308, has it been transmitted by an individual who has knowledge of the sale reported?
It has.
Based upon you being a records custodian, are you able to authenticate the fact that this is a transaction associated with Security Pro USA?
I am.
The actual information, including the product order contained within People's Exhibit 308, is that kept and maintained within the normal and ordinary course of business of Security Pro USA?
It is.
And this particular record, has it been received and maintained and relied upon by Security Pro USA from your platform of Yahoo Small Business?
It has.
Just at this time, I would move for admission of People's Exhibit 308 pursuant to People versus Hewen, Huehn, it's 53, Pacific 3rd, 733, Colorado Appellate Court, 2002, as well as 901A, 901B1, and 8036.
Is there any objection, Ms. Brady?
No, sir.
All right, without objection, the exhibit is admitted, and it is P-TR-308.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
Granted.
If I could have the first page of People's Exhibit 308. So for record purposes, we have People's Exhibit 308 on the screen. If we could, we're scrolling in now in on the top half, make it a little larger for the jury to see. Sir, do you see that also on the computer screen in front of you?
I do.
All right, here's kind of the ground rules. I need you to keep talking into the microphone.
I do.
If you feel like you need to point anything out on the screen, let me know and we can give you a handheld mic. Otherwise, I'm just going to try and talk you through it, okay?
Okay.
I see at the top it says Yahoo. What are we looking at there?
That is just the small business platform. This is the order entry system.
Below that, securityprousa.com. Is that your company?
It is.
Couple of lines below that, it says order ID. What does that refer to?
That is just the number of the order, meaning that this was the 29,754th order.
Is that a unique order number?
It is.
Below that is the date. Tell us what that is.
That is the date that the order was created. It gives, both the day, the actual date, as well as a timestamp of when the order was created.
What was the date?
It was June 28th, 2012.
What was the time?
It looks like it was 8:56 and 39 seconds, and that's Pacific.
Where is your company, Security Pro USA, located out of?
We are located in Culver City, California.
Would that be California time?
It is.
Can you please read for the record who the order was to be shipped and billed to?
It was for James Holmes. Oh, I'm sorry. And it was at 1690, looks like Paris Street, number 10, Aurora, Colorado, 80010.
Below United States, what are those numbers referring to?
That is the customer's phone number.
All of that information, the shipping information, the customer name, the telephone number, how does Security Pro USA obtain that?
The customer would enter it.
Fair to say below that it says bill to the same. I'm guessing that's the same as the shipping address.
That is correct.
The email below that, is that the dsherlockb@hotmail.com email you previously testified to?
It is.
We could scroll down just a bit more, please. Was this order fulfilled?
It was.
How was it shipped?
It was shipped from our physical location via the United States Postal Service with the tracking right by there, the 940-55-1120-108-097-9374.
You may have a better copy in front of you, but can you tell us first off, how was payment made?
Payment was paid online with a MasterCard with the last four digits being the 2217.
I see below the credit card information, I see approval, and below that I see an AVS. Do you see that?
I do.
What does that refer to? Talk to us about that, please.
That is, AVS stands for Address Verification System. What that is when the customer places the purchase, on our store, what happens is an authorization is created, which just puts a temporary hold on the funds. It is then up for, whoever is handling the order, in this case it would be me, to decide whether to accept or reject that order based on the codes. In this case, it's YYY, which indicates that the address and the zip code matched the one on file with his credit card company.
Is that an internal check that your company uses to deter fraud?
It is.
Below that, I see a charged amount. How much was that for?
$336.99.
A couple of lines below, I see a REV share URL. I don't need you to read that, but what is that in general?
That is just, that's basically the search that brought him to our store. In this case, it looks like he did a Bing search for ballistic helmets.
A few lines below that, still on this same page here, I see an IP address. Can you tell us what that IP address is?
That is the customer's IP address. So, whenever you're on the internet, you have a unique IP address, and this is the customer's.
And can you read that into the record, please?
It's 67.156.38.7.
I'm going to have you look at your copy you have in front of you and see if it could be 166 as opposed to 156.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 166.
We could scroll down a bit more in People's Exhibit 308 to the purchase area. Tell us, if you would, please, what was the item that was purchased?
It was a Mitch Level 3 Advanced Combat Helmet. It's a Kevlar helmet, and it was manufactured by the company United Shield.
Are you familiar with that combat helmet?
I am.
Is that a combat helmet sold by Security Pro USA?
It is.
What does Mitch Level 3A refer to, if you know?
Mitch is the standard helmet. It is a type of helmet, and Level 3A is its ballistic rating.
I see to the right there, it has a bunch of different options. It looks like front night vision. What are we looking at there?
Those are just the options available on the helmet. It looks like, in this case, the customer decided to decline the optional front night vision bracket as well as the side rails.
Color?
It is black with the size of large.
And then again, the total at the end there being $336.99. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
That includes the shipping, correct?
Correct.
I see, this is kind of hard to see on this screen here, so I'm going to have you testify to it. I see merchant notes. Do you see that?
Yes.
To the right, it's got some numbers and then some letters. What are we looking at there?
0711 would be the date that the order was shipped. In this case, it looks like it was July 11th of 2012. NM stands for the initials of the person who sold the helmet. And sold shipped means that the payment was charged and that the item was shipped.
Do you know the level 3A, it's Roman numeral 3A, do you know how that level is compared to other levels?
Level 3A is the highest level that you can get for soft armor.
What is soft armor?
Soft armor typically means like ballistic Kevlar or other fibers like that, as opposed to hard armor, which is typically like a steel plate.
Okay, so this particular combat helmet, is it made of Kevlar?
That's correct. It's a ballistic Kevlar helmet.
Thank you. If I could please have People's Exhibit 2247 published. It's a photograph already admitted, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Are you familiar with this particular photograph?
Yes, that is a Mitch Level 3 Advanced Combat Helmet.
Does that appear to be the same type of helmet that was sold that we talked about in People's Exhibit 308?
It is.
If we could have photo 2248, Exhibit 2248, also already admitted. Is there any way to rotate that, please? Be familiar with this.
I am. That is the label for the helmet. In this case, it looks like it was manufactured by United Shield, and it states that it's a Mitch Large helmet, Level 3A.
Does that again match the purchase that we talked about in People's Exhibit 308?
It does.
Can I have one moment, please?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ms. Brady, do you have any cross-examination?
I don't, thank you.
All right, and the jury does not appear to have any questions. May this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor, thank
Is there
you.
any objection?
No objection.
All right, sir, thank you. Call your next witness, please.
People call Brett Mills.
Good morning. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
My name is Brett, B-R-E-T-T, Ashley, A-S-H-L-E-Y, Mills, M-I-L-L-S.
Ms. Pearson, you may proceed.
Mr. Mills, would you please tell us where you work?
I work for the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia.
What do you do at the FBI laboratory?
I'm a forensic examiner in the Firearms and Tool Marks Unit.
How long have you worked at the FBI?
26 years now, ma'am.
How long have you worked in firearms and tool marks?
Together, approximately 22 years.
What do your job duties consist of as a forensic examiner?
Basically what I am tasked to do is to examine evidence, whether it be bullets, cartridge cases, firearms, tools, cast of tool marks, shooting incident reconstructions, or bullet trajectory reconstruction, if you would like to call it that, gunshot residue. I will perform my exams, I will write my report, and if called upon, I will testify in a court of law.
So in trying to determine those things, what kinds of evidence do you analyze or look at?
Well, for firearms, you would have bullets, cartridge cases, other ammunition components, and then a possible or suspect firearm is sent in, and the question is, were these components fired within that firearm? For tool marks, you could have a breaking and entering. Someone uses a pry bar to pry open a door or window. They make a cast of the door. They send in a suspect tool. I'll do minor comparisons between the tool and the cast of the tool to see if it was or was not the tool. For shooting incident reconstructions or bullet trajectory reconstructions, we go out and we try and plot shooter positions, basically through a system of measuring and calculating angles.
How often do you do shooting incident reconstructions?
Depending on how many shootings we are requested to do, we are involved with agent-involved shootings within the Bureau, and we'll go out and assist the inspection team. At our peak, we were going out every 8 days. There were only 4 examiners, so about once a month, and then sometimes we might only do 1 a year.
And in addition to agent-involved shootings, do you also go to crime scenes?
Yes, ma'am. If it's requested from other government agencies, whether it be another federal agency, state, or local, we offer our assistance, and if it is accepted, we'll go out and we'll actually work the scene.
What kind of training do you have to work in the firearms tool mark unit?
It's a 2-year comprehensive training program. It's almost like a mentorship where you work side by side with qualified examiners. You read the literature to understand the foundation and the theory behind firearms identification, tool marks identification. After approximately 18 months, you'll go through you start a series of oral boards where your peers actually test you for your knowledge. Final step would be a series of moot courts, mock exams. You get evidence in, you work it start to finish, and then they have basically a mock trial where the prosecution and defense are your peers, and the jury is actually made up of other members within the Bureau who really have no firearms background to see if we can testify in a clear and concise manner. Once you go through all these steps, it is basically the peers who actually make the decision of whether or not you are a qualified examiner for the FBI.
When did you undergo this training?
It started in 95, and I was qualified in January of 98, ma'am.
Could you also describe your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science from Towson State University in Towson, Maryland.
Now, as part of the FBI program, are you ultimately certified by the laboratory?
I wouldn't say that there's a certification process, but we are qualified in the eyes of the FBI and the FBI laboratory to perform exams and, if need be, testify in a court of law.
Do you undergo ongoing training in the field of shooting incident reconstruction?
No, I mean, there's not a lot of schools. In fact, the Bureau does actually put on the school, actually it's my school, that we will go out and we will train other agencies, and we also train the FBI's evidence response teams.
How do you stay up to date with advances in the science of shooting incident reconstruction?
There's the Association of Firearms and Tool Mark Examiners. They have a journal, a quarterly journal that comes out. Anything that will, regardless whether it's shooting incident reconstruction, is one way to maintain and stay on top of any current trends or changes or cutting edge technology. You basically talk amongst your peers, but we also will perform exams on, when we're actually setting up for classes, we'll shoot different materials with different types of ammunition to give an idea of how the bullet is going to react as it goes through these objects themselves.
Do you teach in your field?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What do you teach?
Serial number restoration, shooting incident reconstruction, gunshot residue, although we haven't taught that in a while, and techniques and firearms identification.
Who do you teach?
It could be federal, state, local laboratories, local law enforcement. We've taught international police forces of all of our disciplines at one time.
How long have you been teaching shooting incident reconstruction?
Since approximately 2000, 2001.
And the other areas that you've discussed, is that the same period of time?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you testified as an expert witness in the fields of firearms and tool marks previously?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And have you testified specifically in the area of shooting incident reconstruction previously?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Would you estimate for us how many times and in what courts?
Testifying just for all my testimony would be between 75 and 80, and that would be in state, local, federal, territorial, and national courts of the United Kingdom, Indonesia, and the Caribbean islands.
And with regard to shooting incident reconstruction, how many of those times were you an expert witness in that area?
That was 9, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would move to admit Brett Mills as an expert in firearms and tool marks, and specifically in shooting incident reconstruction.
Is there any objection?
No objection to his qualification in shooting incident reconstruction. May we approach briefly?
Yes. All right, without objection and pursuant to Rule 702 of the Colorado Rules of Evidence, Mr. Mills is qualified as an expert witness in the field of shooting incident reconstruction. That means, folks, that he is now allowed to render expert opinions in that field. That's, again, pursuant to Rule 702 of the Colorado Rules of Evidence and People versus Shrek, as well as my Order D-106. Folks, you're not bound by the testimony of a witness who testifies as an expert. The credibility of an expert's testimony is to be considered as that of any other witness. You may believe all of an expert witness's testimony, part of it, or none of it. The weight that you give the testimony is entirely your decision. All right, you may proceed, Ms. Pearson.
Mr. Mills, what is shooting incident reconstruction?
Shooting incident reconstruction is a reconstruction of a crime scene to determine the paths of bullets or projectiles as they travel through objects to see if a possible shooter position can be learned from all that.
Now, some of us have heard the term bullet trajectory reconstruction. Is that the same or different as shooting incident reconstruction?
Yes, ma'am. It was, in the Bureau, it was actually bullet reconstruction until approximately 2003. Then my predecessor who had taken over the SIR class, changed it to shooting incident reconstruction. It's the same term, it's just different names.
What does a shooting incident reconstruction expert do?
They'll show up to the scene, they'll analyze basically any possible bullet holes, impacts, measurements are taken, photographs are taken of the position of the holes, basically everywhere within there. Say, for an example, this is the room, and there's holes along the walls. You would measure the entire room as if you were going to draw it. And then wherever there was a hole or possible impact, you would then measure and mark that on your diagram also. Then if there are actual trajectories, you would run rods to figure out which point goes to which point in order to determine. And if you have basically a convergence of several shots, that's why it works very well. If you have the more shots, the better, in order to isolate a particular position. If it's one or two, it could be random, an individual could be walking or moving. There's too many variables for that.
What is the basis of shooting incident reconstruction? What's it based upon?
No, it's based on mathematics. You are basically doing, depending on what type of item that you're measuring, but you're placing a hole three-dimensionally in space. And you can take a secondary hole and you measure that one. Well, you can take those 2 points and those two measurements, and through trig or trigonometry, you could actually calculate out the angle between those 2 points.
What methods are used to determine the trajectory of a bullet?
There's hand measuring, where you could measure every single bullet hole, provide a three-dimensional scale. When we run rods, then you can use an angle finder or a protractor to get your horizontal and vertical angles. There is 3D scanning, which is basically just a laser that will spin and rotate, and every time it hits an object, it will basically calculate out, because the speed of light is known, it'll calculate out that distance so that you're creating basically a point cloud, just little dots all over the place. The more measurement you have, the greater the accuracy will be. Although you can actually calculate from the rods that are in the angle measurement, or from the point cloud, you could actually calculate out your measurements for there. Another way would be a total station. It's a surveying tool. You see the guys alongside the roads all the time. One guy will have a little orange cone, and he's holding his stick, and then down the road you'll actually see an individual with what looks like a telescope or whatever. He's actually shooting a distance measurement through, I believe with the total station, it's infrared. And so again, they know how fast it travels, how fast it comes back, and they can calculate angles and distance and everything that way.
In a crime scene, do you often use all of those different methods?
For shooting incident reconstruction, yes, ma'am, we would.
how do you verify that the information that you get in a shooting incident reconstruction is accurate?
Well, that's one reason why we would like to have three measurements or three types of measurements present, because the total station, the 3D laser, and hand measurements should all have the same types of measurements. The problem is that you're dealing with technology, you're dealing with software, you're dealing with computers, you're dealing with human error. So you want to have as much information gathered, and you can cross-check with the 3D scanner. They can set up an object that they know the exact measurement of that object. They'll run their scan. If it all comes back and say it's a 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot block, and the measurements are all 1 foot, they know that the 3D scanner is the same. For total station, you can shoot a distance, then you can hand measure it and actually see, am I measuring 25 feet? Yes, I'm measuring 25 feet. Then you also have the human error. But when we take all this information and all this data back to the laboratory, we'll sit there and we'll take all that information in order to prevent a finished document.
Now I'd like to talk about this case specifically. At some point in time, were you assigned to work on this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall when you began your work on the case?
We arrived in Denver on the 23rd. We started the morning of the 24th of July, 2012.
And the 24th would have been Tuesday.
Yes, ma'am.
What was your role at the scene? What were you asked to do?
To perform a shooting incident reconstruction of the movie theaters, Theater 8 and 9.
How did you begin that process?
When we arrived on scene, the crime scene had been active already. The evidence response team had already gone through and started numbering possible bullet holes and impacts within the movie theater 9. When we arrived, they were still labeling and numbering, so we literally used the same numbering system that they had already previously started. But for my notes, I need to know what is a hole and what is an impact. A hole would be a perforation that carries through a seat or a back or a wall. And an impact is where a projectile stops. It proceeds no further. It could be into concrete. It could just be a dent in a piece of metal. Then as I proceeded through each row and each seat, if there were any new holes or possible bullet holes or impacts, we labeled those, documented them, had the total station team surveyed in all their measurements. There was an individual from the operational projects unit who was doing the 3D scanning for us, and then we had our photographer. So working together as a team, we gathered all the information and documented everything that we had or needed in order for me to write a report and provide a final document.
Now, we've previously seen photographs of impacts 9-1 through 9-240 in Theater 9. Are those the same, and they were referred to simply as impacts previously?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go back through all of those and determine whether some of them were holes, some were impacts, and actually give them a name that meant something more specific than the term impact did when they were first looked at?
Oh, yes, ma'am. No, for everything that I needed for my documentation and for report writing, I labeled whether it was a hole.
Now, again, you indicated that the difference between holes and impacts is what?
A hole will actually pass through the object, whereas an impact, whatever is causing the impact, will stop. So if it runs into a harder material, say concrete, you might just have an indentation. It provides an impact point, but there is no hole, so there's no carrying on of the trajectory.
Ms. Pearson, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Today is a date when we have to take an early lunch, so
Okay.
why don't we go ahead and break at this time, okay?
Okay.
All right, members of the jury, I know it's a little early, but I have a meeting that I have to go to during the lunch hour, so let's go ahead and take our lunch break at this time. Please make sure that you abide by all my advisements during the lunch break, and then let's have you back in an hour and a half. We're still taking the same amount of time. We're just taking the lunch break a little bit earlier than usual. So let's have you back at about 10 after 1, if that's okay. Thank you. The record should reflect that the jury has now exited the courtroom. Please be seated, everyone. Let's take our lunch break now, folks, and I'll see you back here in about an hour and a half, okay? All right, thank you. The court will be in recess.